Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Neil Haley Show. The Neil Haley Show is heard all over the world on television and radio, and we interview celebrities, authors, educators, businesses, and brands, either in Bethel Park's TV studios or on location all over the world, on the radio and on the phone. So check it out and enjoy the show today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Neil Haley Show. You can check me out on Twitter at TotalTutor and neilhaley.com. And I'm first excited to welcome to the program my co-host, Peter Alvich. Peter, we got a really exciting guest for us today. So are you looking forward to him?
Oh, I definitely am. It's awesome for me to be here, and I'm ready to get to some awesome chatting.
All right. I love working with Triumph Books, so I'm excited to welcome to the program author Matt Cerrone, author of the New York Mets Fans Bucket List. Matt, thanks for calling. How are you?
I'm doing good, guys. How are you doing?
Fantastic, Matt. Let's jump right into the whole process of thinking about the New York Mets. I am a huge fan of a certain era of the Mets, and we'll talk about that era for sure in our conversation. But Matt, tell us your background and a little bit about who you are and why you wrote this book.
So I grew up a Mets fan, obviously, and in Connecticut. I'm 41, so I came of age in the 80s and then suffered through the 90s and was in love with the late 90s Bobby Valentine, Mike Piazza era Mets. And when I moved out of market in the early 2000s, I was down in D.C. I started a blog about the Mets. It was a hobby for a school project. I kept writing it when the class was over, and because it was fun and I was enjoying it, it was a nice way to sort of stay connected to the news cycle. The site began to grow. People were reading. Blogs were somewhat new at the time, so I think, it kind of caught on. As I started making a little money with the site, I approached the team's newly launched television network to try to see if there was a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
I was struggling with access. They were struggling to build an audience online. We found a way to work together. In time, they ultimately purchased the site, hired me to be their director of digital content. And, I kept writing that blog and kept doing it, and it just kept growing. And so I kind of stumbled into this career of digital media and building content businesses to connect with sports fans and stuff. And I always along the way kind of punted or avoided writing a book because, as a blogger, I write in sort of short bursts and it's very in the moment. And I never really get my hands or head around any particular project. But this one came to me by way of a literary agent who was terrific. And it's a series of books that Triumph has put out. So there's a beat writer that wrote a Yankees book very similar, a Red Sox writer wrote a Red Sox one. I'm not a beat writer. I'm a fan. And I write about the team like a fan. And I have press access and I go and I do all those things, but I'm still a fan. So
Right.
I think they were a little concerned. They were nervous. They didn't know how it would work. But ultimately what the book became was this great opportunity for me to write about all these different fan experiences that fans should have or know or be aware of from a fan perspective, but then also add some information and some, insider kind of stuff from the team as well. So it was a great project to be part of.
And that's awesome. And Peter, you just chime in anytime you have a question for Matt, for sure. The first thing I want to talk about, Matt, is my favorite time as a Met fan, or I guess the Mets I loved, were the Doc Gooden days, the Darryl Strawberry days, that character team, that amazing Mets team. Was that one of your favorite teams of all time as a fan of the Mets?
Well, obviously, how could you not? And it's funny how that team has their legendary status has become something in sports, let alone among Mets fans, that is just, it's iconic. The partying and the books that have been written about that team and the stories that have come out have only, enhanced, I think, the memories that we have as Mets fans. And I was 10, so I was young, but, that was my introduction, basically. So I thought, wow, this is amazing. What what a great story and thrill ride is wonderful. And then the subsequent, 15, 20 years or whatever would not be so wonderful. So it was actually a great way to prepare for being a Mets fan, which is, hey, this is awesome, and now you're going to suffer for a decade. That era was just terrific. I mean, the excitement and the miraculousness of it. People forget they were dominant, and then we're the underdogs, all within like a week of each other. And so, I mean, it was a wild ride. It was awesome.
It was definitely a wild ride. Go ahead, Peter.
Oh, sorry. I was just wondering, because being a fan of, and then creating the book, I was reading and I was checking out that there are like activities and things you can do remotely if you can't, actually be where the team is. Like, what are some of those so you can kind of start getting involved if you maybe are a fan, or maybe if you're not a fan, you're kind of looking to get into being a fan?
Oh. Yeah, I think that actually the 16 is a great place to start, because if you can get your hands on it, if you can search Vimeo, you can find it. I reference in the book one of the bucket list items actually is the 1986 Year to Remember yearbook, basically video. And it's done in a way that, at the time, Major League Baseball was sending cameras around to sort of document teams, and the Mets were one of them. And I go into the details of that in the book. The way it came together was very interesting. We take for granted that kind of stuff now, but back then, that was a big deal. And they put this video together that really did a wonderful job of capturing sort of the goofiness of the 80s, but the drama and the seriousness of the season and the fun that team was having. And what's great about it is that it's not about the off-field shenanigans.
Right.
It's not about the partying and all this, because no one really knew yet about all those things that hadn't come out. The story in that video is very much about on field and the fans and the fun and the music and just everything 80s about it was terrific. And it's a great little introduction to, I think, part of what the modern Mets fan is about. Not the Tom Seaver 60s Mets, but really sort of my age group, 40, and it's just terrific. So if you can find that, to me, that has nothing to do with buying a ticket or going to a game. That's just finding it online and watching it. It's just high comedy, entertainment, drama. It's terrific.
Yeah, and see, Matt, Matt, on the field, the Mets on the field were just such an amazing team when you talk about the era, and then also the newest era of the Mets that almost won it all, right? So you have both the 80s and you have the current Mets from a couple years ago that really shocked the world and brought back the Mets folklore, right?
Yeah, it started to shift. We came out of that decade and a half of the Yankees, 2 decades, I suppose. I blocked some of it out of them just dominating really all of New York sports outside of a couple, football giants moments. I mean, it was all Yankees all the time. And, that started to fizzle and they started to rebuild. And at that same time, the Mets were finally coming out of this rebuild of their own, and these pitchers were kind of coming of age, and they were finally starting to spend a little money after a few years of austerity and kind of getting their financial house in order. And it all just came together a little quicker than I think people expected, Mets fans included. They find themselves in the World Series, and then ultimately what happens is all of our collective expectations get raised. And the last couple of years have been a little frustrating. There's been a lot of injuries and a lot of things that, you kind of always assume that there's this natural progression. Okay, you rebuild, we get to the World Series, you lose, all right, next year we'll win, then we'll become, the next dynasty. Well, it doesn't always work that way, and I think we're seeing that now. And, that's all part of being a sports fan, too. So, yeah, the Mets are sort of back, on the headlines and in the hearts of Mets fans, in the hearts of the city. If you could just get that World Championship or get back into that, that success circle, I think it'll really solidify it.
Matt, where's the best place we can find information on you and also Triumph Books to find out about the book and stuff? Where can we go?
Absolutely. Well, to find information on me, you can go to MatthewCerrone.com. It's 2 R's on MatthewCerrone.com. The book, you can do MatthewCerrone.com/MetsBook, and that'll get you right to Amazon. And then for my Mets stuff, MetsBlog.com. I mean, if you're looking for day-to-day news and reaction, what you should be thinking, a little bit of context of what's going on with the team, MetsBlog.com is without question the place to go. And so, those are the 3 things. But MatthewCerrone.com/MetsBook to get you to the Amazon page.
All right, Matt, thanks for calling. Take care, and best of luck.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anytime.
Take care. Okay, bye-bye. You're listening to Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins.
Sid, it's my boy.
Way to go.
Yeah, let's go, Reds! Tip your hat for me so that everybody in Bethel Park can take a look at that.
We're calling here to get to this point. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do it without you. That Game 5 is something I think we'll all remember. So thanks for all your support. Thanks for showing up today.
Thanks. Another win, bringing it home. We're really hoping for like the triple. We want to be the first team to do that. It'll be great.
We're back to the Neil Haley Show with my co-host Peter Halovich, and we have a really good, interesting guest on the line. So I'm excited to welcome to the program Dr. Amy Cooper Hakim, author of Working with Difficult People. Dr. Amy, thanks for calling. And I've had that kind of difficult day today, recording and going live on radio, where I haven't worked with the best situations today. So just like a lot of crazy stuff. So how are you, Dr. Amy?
Unfortunately, I think many of us have those days. It's nice to meet you and to speak with you. Thank you for having me on.
I mean, absolutely. And when you think about specifically enough difficult people and working with them, you got to just roll with the punches, don't you, Dr. Amy?
We definitely do. And I encourage people to try their best to take emotion out of the situation when dealing with difficult people in the workplace specifically. You know, it's very easy to get ruffled up and excited or upset about particular instances. And if we can sort of take that away and just deal with the issue at hand. So is a deliverable actually on my desk when it needs to be? Is this person responding to an email? Is this person calling into my radio show? All of those things are the actual facts that we need to handle. And when we take away that upsettedness or the anxiety that comes with disappointment from someone not doing what they need to do, then we can better tackle the issue and get what we need to get done.
It's so true. Peter, working with difficult people, you've lived with it as well, right, Peter?
I definitely have, and I'm just curious because, like, we're going into, like, you know, turning everything digital, making emails, sending files, all these different things. I'm just curious, in your point of view, like, is technology helping or hindering kind of like employees and employers communicating and working in the workplace? How do you feel about that as we're going more so into the technological age?
Sure. I mean, that's a great question. I think that too often people rely on technology to communicate instead of just going next door to the cubicle or office to have that dialogue. We do rely on emails, and it's very common for someone sitting right next to someone instead of actually getting up and speaking to type that email. That's just the workflow in an organization, and there are benefits to that, in that we can actually have an electronic paper trail of a particular dialogue or interactions. There are pros. But I do encourage people to step back and go back to the old way where we actually do communicate and interact live or one-on-one when possible. And then we follow up that dialogue with an emailed recap. So we still have the paper trail, but we actually are able to communicate. A lot of times if we're texting, even for social reasons, after a while, someone might pick up the phone because it just gets too annoying and you don't quite understand the inflections and the intonations when you're typing. Or there might be, I have about when I go 5 texts back and forth with someone, I just pick up the phone. Say, okay, I know you want to text me, but let's just talk for 2 seconds. We'll figure this out and be done with it. And the same thing, by the way, with email. If you're ever in an office setting and you feel uncomfortable or upset by that communication and you don't quite understand how whatever someone's typing is so different than what just happened when you were in the meeting last week. Pick up the phone or walk next door and make sure that you're on the same page, because when we're able to communicate and hear the inflection and actually see someone's eyes or hand motions or nodding of approval, it's different than reading words on a page. And sometimes just the way that something is written can totally be misinterpreted and not received the way it's intended.
That's so true. And that, so, working with difficult people, but also making sure you're not difficult to other people. Right? That's the other thing probably in your book as well, Dr. Amy, is that we could be the difficult people as well. And then we're looking at ourselves in the mirror. We don't know that.
We always have to think about our role in the relationship and take responsibility for the part that we play in making things comfortable or not when we're interacting with someone. And as a leader, as an employee, and even as a subordinate, It's so important to recognize the role that we play. When we're positive and kind and responsible and sincere, then oftentimes those type of behaviors are then reflected back to us by those whom we're interacting with.
So true. Now, when I guess some strategies, we got to pick up your book. That's one strategy, but can you give us some quick tips of how we can work with difficult people in a way that doesn't cause us to lose our job or get in a fist fight, as we've seen in certain situations, or go even in certain countries as politicians fighting? How can we work with difficult people?
Well, the main thing to take away is to use technology to help us to create that paper trail when needed, so that we can cover our own backs and make sure that if there's a scuffle or a problem or a disagreement and we come to some type of a conclusion or solution, that we then have some credible way to say this is what happened. A lot of times we have backstabbing individuals in the office, or a boss who may take our idea and run with it. So having a paper trail from an email standpoint is very helpful. Taking that emotion out of the relationship is critical. Again, not to lack emotion or empathy when interacting, but try not to get in that huff and upsetted component when you're interacting. Instead, say, okay, how can I rationally and logically apply certain tactics to get what I want and need from this person, and in turn, he or she can get what they want and need from me. So I think too many times in the workplace, people want to be friends or best friends with everyone. And we're most likely not going to like the majority of people we interact with at work. We may, and if we do, it's a bonus, but that shouldn't be the goal.
And I think that when you're working with so many people, and Peter can also think about this, is if you're working side by side with somebody, they're going to get on our nerves at one point in time. So Peter, when you acknowledge that fact as well, compared to if you get the opportunity like myself or Peter, where we're working as in a lot of ways that are not as face-to-face interactive for long periods of time, we don't have to deal with as many difficult people, the people that have to go into the workplace every day. Right, Peter?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a remote version, I think, takes away, some of those awkward or irritating or, problematic situations. But, it's interesting because when you start thinking about technology, I mean, the other thing is being personal when you have remote conversations, like now that we've got video calls or face chats or things like that too. It's now also a possibility to be personal that way. But I was thinking about it, and I'm curious when you were creating the book and you were thinking about this, what have you found, whether it's employer or employee that's been majority on the side that's been the problem, or is it primarily subjective depending on the company that you're at?
Well, I think that, obviously let's take a narcissist. That's a hot word in today's society.
That's a great one.
So if you have a narcissistic boss, that narcissistic boss was most likely a narcissistic employee.
Yes.
And at some point, a narcissistic subordinate. So I don't think that whether that person is at the subordinate level or the colleague level or the boss level is really the issue. A lot of times people who come to me have narcissistic bosses or have, the boss is always the one who gets put on the hot seat. Or I'll have an executive call me in because, his or her subordinate is just, horrific.
Yes.
But the reality is that those individuals have been horrific since they were young. It's not because of their level within the organization. And I think that, difficult people are indeed promoted. Difficult people still do keep jobs. And sometimes difficult people just need an ally, and all of a sudden they're not so difficult anymore. So there are things that we can do and lenses that we might use to help us to see and look for the positive and see how we can get what we want and need from those people without going crazy. So we can go home to the people and the things we want to enjoy.
That brings up an interesting question I was thinking of is, because you were saying, sometimes they might need an ally or they might need a friend. What would you recommend to someone who might be having kind of a difficult situation, who, when you're kind of feeling like, maybe they just need a friend or an ally, how would you kind of start establishing, that conversation or just kind of start approaching, hey, do you need a friend or do you need an ally? How do you think the best way would be for someone to do that if they have a feeling that they might need it, the other employee or employer might need someone as a friend or as an ally?
Sure, that's a great component of just nice interactions and relationships. I had a great boss. His name was Mike. Shout out to Mike Burkett. He was awesome. Really the best boss I ever had in my entire life. And one time I went into the office, it was probably 8:30 in the morning, and I had a rough morning, and I tried to put on a smile and be happy, but I was, I was in my own mind. And I walked into the office, and he noticed something was up. And I literally said, good morning, and I went straight to my office. And 2 seconds later, I saw him in my doorway. Hey, Aim, what's up? You want to go to lunch today? And it was just so nice that he knew something was off. And obviously I had to get through the morning and deal with my meetings and things. But I knew that my boss wanted to cheer me up, and he wanted me to know that whatever was going on, he had my back. And that really made a big difference.
Yes.
And it's an important lesson that stood by me and stuck with me all these years later. Because, sometimes it's just that little holding a door open or saying good morning or, hey, I like your shirt, or, do you want to grab a coffee later? Those type of things that sometimes we forget because we're so busy with our own daily lives.
Absolutely.
But when we take the time to recognize that, it makes such a huge difference. And maybe that's the only nice thing someone hears that day, or the only compliment they've received in a week. Or, it's so simple to be kind and nice and just look at others and see not necessarily what you think that you want to give them, but what they really need.
I love it. And so, and that's the key component. It's more like it's got to be, when we deal with difficult people, we have to give in certain ways, especially if we're a leader. We have to really recognize our employees and the people that we work around us, their feelings, how they're feeling, what they're doing, not be so self-centered, Dr. Amy. Right? That's the big thing right there.
Definitely. Right? And in today's world, we live in this era of entitlement where we all feel that we can get whatever we want just by paying for it or by knowing the right person. Or no, we need to stop that. We need to just be nice because it's the right thing to do, treat people the way they should be treated, and then expect that same respect back to us. And we'll get it when we act that way.
Well,
we're all humans. We all have flaws, and
Fabulous. So the best place we can find information on you, purchase your book, and learn more about you, where can we go?
Well, my Twitter handle is Amy Cooper Hakim. My website is amycooperhakim.com.
Okay.
And that should pretty much get you. Please follow me on those sites and LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook, and would love to help you guys out and talk further if you're ever interested. It's been such a
Absolutely.
pleasure.
Let me know some topics to talk about there in the news, and feel free to come back on, or I'll keep you on a filler space as I talked about guests and different things like that. I'm always looking for more chatting and more content, and you're fabulous, and we definitely can learn more about you and all that. So I appreciate you calling, and that's something to really think about with difficult people. And that's what I'm going to kind of ask my audience right now, TV and radio. If you're dealing with difficult people, contact Dr. Amy, and also look at yourself in the mirror. So thanks again for calling, Dr. Amy, and best of luck.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, guys, that was the Neil Haley Show. Another fabulous show. You can check me out on Twitter at TotalTutor and NeilHaley.com. And take care, and we'll talk next week.